Hello. In this week's Torah portion, Bo, we read this injunction about Passover. Ushmartem et hamatzot, and you shall watch over the matzot. What does it mean? Well, there are four levels of understanding of the Torah. The pshat, or plain meaning of the text, the remez, or meaning that is only hinted at, the drash, or scholarly interpretation, and the sods, or the deep, mystical interpretation. Let us examine two related levels of understanding of this verse. First, the pshat, plain meaning. The verse says that we must wash the dough of the matzah carefully and finish baking it quickly so that it does not rise. Time is of the essence. To be specific, in the process of making shmura matzah, that is, watched matzah, the bakers, who must be observant Jews, must combine flour with water and turn it into matzah in just 18 minutes. So, they roll the dough into flat circles, make tiny holes in it, and put it into an oven at 1300 degrees for 20 seconds. After it cools, they inspect it and box it. Then they repeat the process. However, between baking cycles, every surface that the dough has touched must be scoured or replaced. If any dough from the previous cycle remains, it contaminates the dough of the next cycle. Then they must wash their hands and cover all work surfaces with fresh paper. Why emphasize the haste? The Torah says, quote, "The Israelites baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not tarry, and had not prepared any provisions for themselves." And later in Deuteronomy, "For 7 days you should eat matzot, because you left Egypt in haste." Unquote. So we must eat matzah on Pesach to remind us of the haste with which we had to leave Egypt. But why is it so important to remember that the exodus from Egypt happened swiftly and suddenly? In fact, there are only two positive commandments regarding Pesach. One is precisely to eat matzah, and the other is telling the story. The Maharal from 16th century Prague wrote a great deal about this verse. In his view, the lesson of the haste is that God himself took us out of Egypt, and not human or natural forces. God makes things happen very fast. We emphasize this in the Haggadah, in which God is quoted as saying, "I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, I and not an angel. And I will slay all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I and not a seraph. And I will execute judgment upon all the gods of Egypt, I and not a messenger. I, God, it is I and no other." Unquote. By remembering the swiftness of the Exodus, we remember that God made it happen, and that's why the matzah is central. The other symbols are not as important. My own view about the special character of the matzah is this. First, let me list the other symbols of Pesach. The maror, which reminds us of the bitterness of slavery. The haroset, which reminds us of the mortar the slaves used. The shank bone, or Pesach, which reminds us that God passed over the houses of the Israelites and did not kill the firstborn in it, because the blood of the paschal lamb was smeared on the doorposts. The wine, which reminds us that we are freed, since it is a royal drink. The leaning on the left, which also reminds us that we were freed, because that's what free people did back then, etc. Now note that while some Pesach symbols reflect life before the Exodus, such as the maror, the haroset, or the shank bone, and some reflect life after the Exodus, such as the wine or the reclining, only the matzah refers to life during the Exodus. Now, let us look for a deeper meaning for our quote, "And you shall watch over the matzot." The Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael, a halachic midrash on the book of Exodus, says, quote, "Rabbi Yoshia says, do not read et hamatzot, watch over the matzot, but et hamitzvot, watch over the commandments. The letters are the same, but the vowels are different. Just as we may not allow the matzot to become leavened, so we may not allow the commandments to become leavened by waiting too long to perform them. If a commandment comes your way, perform it immediately." Unquote. Thus, the deeper lesson is that we must be prompt in performing all commandments. The Maharal notes that if the Torah only wanted to talk about matzah and nothing else, it would have stated, watch for hametz. That is, make sure the matzah is not contaminated. Since the Torah says watch over the matzot, there must be a deeper meaning. So a teaching is needed. Mitzvot must be performed with alacrity, promptly, and with cheerful readiness. There is a tie to the pshat above. We must emulate God. Just as he was prompt with the Exodus, let us be prompt in performing mitzvot. There is a basis in the Torah for this attitude. On 2 occasions, Abraham was swift to obey God's commandments. First, in the matter of circumcision. Quote, and the Lord said to Abraham, every male among you shall be circumcised, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and every male in his house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the same day, as God had said to him. And Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Unquote. Second, in the matter of the binding of his son Isaac. Quote, and Abraham rose up early in the morning to take his son Isaac to be sacrificed. Unquote. The Talmud reinforces this notion. The zealous are early in the performance of commandments. Or, one should always run for a matter of halakha, even on Shabbat. Or, if a candidate for conversion is accepted, he is quickly circumcised. Why quickly? Because the performance of a commandment must not in any way be delayed. Or, the school of Rabbi Ishmael taught that any place where the word command is stated, its only purpose is to denote exhortation to speed, for that time and for all time. Exhortation because it is written, and command Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him, and for all time because it is written, from the day that the Lord commanded and onward throughout your generations. Unquote. The Talmud also relates in vivid imagery the story of Gamzu, in which a man died because Gamzu was too slow in helping him. Quote from Tractate Ta'anit. Nahum of Gamzu was blind in both his eyes. His 2 hands and legs were amputated, and his whole body was covered with boils. He was living in a dilapidated house, on a bed whose feet were standing in bowls of water to prevent the ants from crawling onto him. His disciples said to him, Master, since you are wholly righteous, why has all this happened to you? He replied, I have brought it all upon myself. Once I was journeying on the roads and was making for the house of my father-in-law. I had with me 3 asses, one laden with food, one with drink, and one with all kinds of dainties. A poor man met me and stopped me on the road and said to me, Master, give me something to eat. I replied to him, wait until I have unloaded something from the ass. I had hardly managed to unload something from the ass when the man died from hunger. I then went and laid myself on him and exclaimed, May my eyes, which had no pity upon your eyes, become blind. May my hands, which had no pity upon your hands, be cut off. And may my legs, which had no pity upon your legs, be amputated. My mind was not at rest until I added, May my whole body be covered with boils. Unquote. The Mishnah concludes by tapping its foot. Quote, Rabbi Tarfon said, the day is short, and the work is much, and the workers are lazy, and the reward is great, and the master of the house is pressing. It is not your responsibility to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. Unquote. So, we must perform mitzvot fast. Death is a deadline that enjoins us not to delay. Another point emphasized by commentators is that we must not perform mitzvot quickly just to get them out of the way, but because we're eager to perform them. The Radbaz from 16th century Spain, Israel, and Egypt even said, it is better to perform commandments quickly than to delay them so we can perform them better later. Thus, in his view, the best can be the enemy of the good. But some disagree. Let's be specific. How much time do we have? Not all mitzvot are time-sensitive, equally. Some are very time-sensitive, such as matzah making, Shabbat and holiday observance, Shema, Tefillin, circumcision. Most Jews understand and respect this time sensitivity. Others are not time sensitive at all, such as all negative commandments. So the teaching that concerns us here, performing commandments with alacrity, refers primarily to positive commandments that are not time-bound, such as studying Torah, giving charity, performing good deeds, making peace between people, loving one's neighbor, pursuing justice, honoring parents and teachers, procreating, repenting for misdeeds, making restitution, etc. We must be particularly careful to perform these mitzvot promptly. The Mishnah says, quote, Hillel said, "Do not say, when I have time I will study, because you may never have the time." Shammai said, "Make your study of Torah a practice fixed in time." Rabbi Eliezer said, "Repent one day before your death." The Mishnah also states that women are exempted from positive time-bound commandments. Men are liable and women are exempt from all positive commandments, i.e. those that must be performed at specific times. That's from the Talmud. But all positive commandments are not limited to time, are binding upon both men and women, and all negative precepts, whether or not limited to time, are binding on both men and women. Unquote. The reason for that exemption is that women are expected to bear children, raise them, and run their households. Nevertheless, there is no universal agreement on the full list of the commandments from which women are exempt. The Talmud lists specifically residing in the sukkah, raising the lulav, listening to the shofar, wearing tzitzit or tefillin, counting the omer, and saying the Shema. Not beyond that. Some time-bound mitzvot have specific times attached to them. For example, after you say hamotzi over bread, you have one halachic unit of time to eat the bread. What is a halachic unit of time? It's called kedei achilat pras, the time required to eat half a loaf of bread. It has been estimated to range from 3 to 9 minutes. Chabad rules that it is 4 minutes. In conclusion, the Maharal's overarching view is that the mitzvah is the vehicle that takes us from the physical to the metaphysical. Performing mitzvot promptly expresses our desire to go beyond the physical and break through to the metaphysical, and in so doing, establish a relationship with God, who transcends time. Shabbat Shalom.